All right. Well, the metal has been milled out. Um, I'll put some how tos on how to properly forge, shape out the metal on a later date. As of right now, I just wanted to get you the basic idea. So you've seen it's gone through the mill. It's gone from a tiny little ingot into a strip of gold. So that's white gold, 14 karat palladium based white gold. It came. That's the one I paid the most attention to. I wanted that one to be more or less the smoothest. Don't get me wrong; they all have to be smooth, formed, and uniform. However, the sterling silver is going to be turned into solder. Essentially, we're going to melt that in place to fuse everything together. So the surface needs to be as the surface needs to be as smooth as possible, uniform, polished, sanded down. Forgive that. However, the sides, I'm not paying as much attention to them as I would because number one, we're gonna have to do some filing. Number two, I want them to be a little more protruded than the gold. That way, we're not gonna chop any gold when we clean it up. This is Don't get me wrong. If you're gonna be using sheet or material that can pre-made sheet or anything that can cut them uniformly, the the smoother the better. However, your base metal, which is going to be the one that does not melt, the one that's going to hold the foundation together. In this case, it's going to be the white gold. That's the one that really needs to be the best. The rest of it is, obviously going to melt. When I make them in 800 silver, I mean that alloy basically completely melts, and you have about a second and a half gap before you take the heat off. Otherwise, it becomes a puddle. So as long as the material is clean and tightly bound, you're set. When all is said and done, you're going to be heating this up to the point where both of these metals approach their full temperature. They're going to start to get gooey, and then the gold is going to keep expanding while the silver melts. As the silver is melting and is becoming liquid, the gold is going to continue to expand. Its pores are going to continue to expand. The silver is going to run like solder. Wherever you direct it with the heat, it'll flow into the empty crevices, it'll flow into the pores of the gold. Once heat is removed, the silver is going to cool down rapidly. The gold is going to stay expanding for a bit. Silver is going to it's going to come back from its flow and it's going to solidify. It will solidify while it's raced inside the pores of of the gold. This is what forms the bond on a molecular level. At that point, heat is removed, and you have a solid piece. From that point on, you're going to need to use compression to get it, as tight as possibly can. But for all intents and purposes, if you've done it correctly at that point, you will have a solid billet. So we're going to be doing that today. First things first, we're going to chop these into sections. Silver and gold, we're going to be chopping them into 15 millimeter sections, and we're going to stack those sections up into a nice little billet. We're going to bind it with wire, and then we're going to torch it and get it into one solid piece. So let's move on to the next step. We're going to start chopping these up. So once the stack has been cut, once the layers have been cut and stacked, well, first I actually put them in denatured alcohol, degreased them totally, and then dry them off properly. I don't touch them at that point, no fingerprint oils, and basically stack them up. Get them as tight as you can, however you can. I use a vice grip that has the jaws filed down so it's nice and smooth and it's level. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to slam that end in a vise, compress it as tightly as I can. I'm going to use the squared off section lower of the jaws of the vise so I don't put any teeth marks on it. And then I'm going to be using galvanized steel binding wire to compress it down, make sure it doesn't move. And then we're going to be fusing it up. So let's go over to the vise. Alright, well, as you can see, we got it clamped really good. So it's compressed to no end on both sides. We have one little area right there that's not touching. That's where the wires are going to go. So once we get that done, we will have a much better view. So bear with me. Alright. Make sure I go over the wire twice, that way it doesn't cut into the piece. If you just do it once, it's really, it can presses, I think, more in one area, and it will actually cut into the billet. So I go around twice. That way it's more of a pressure bond than a grip bond, if that makes sense. Like, it's squeezing it, but it's not really, at the point where I'm going for, it's not really going to have much of an effect on the surface. I don't know why that is when you double up, but it is. So now let's cut that. We'll tighten this up. Get need to get an initial tightening, and then you can relax a little bit because you have it set in place. All right, that's getting there. So we can just all right, that one's nice and tight. Maybe a bit more. Okay. Now I just slide it out. I don't want the whole thing to come out. And then retighten. Put a corresponding strap around the other side. Once this is tightened up, you're pretty much good to go. And there's your strap. So we have a nice strapped up billet. It's fairly even. It's even. Now we fuse. Fun time.